Welcome to GeekDIYMechanic Mechanic. The purpose of this video is to discuss a case study about a dirty mass airflow sensor generating a P0171 trouble code. Let's navigate to it. A P0171 code is a fuel system too lean Bank 1. A friend of mine owns a pizza restaurant and has numerous delivery vehicles, and one of his delivery vehicles had the 171 code. He tried to resolve it himself. He was unsuccessful, so he asked for my help. What he did before I got there was perform two smoke tests on the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold and found no leaks. He also cleaned the mass airflow sensor before I got there. Using his scan tool, which was a single line scan tool, meaning it didn't graph, we pulled the trouble code. Again, we got P0171, and the freeze frame data indicated the trouble code was generated at about 2625 RPM with a very high long-term and short-term fuel numbers, about 30 combined or so. I wanted to run more tests with my tools, so I asked if I could come back later. Unfortunately, when I returned, he went home for the day, but the people at the restaurant did let me work on the car. So I hooked up my scan tool, and I noticed that the long-term and short-term fuel trims at idle, 1500 and 2500 stayed very high. So I knew it was an intake vacuum leak, which matched his smoke tests. Generally, when you have an intake vacuum leak causing a lean condition, when you move up through the RPM ranges, the short-term and long-term fuel trims get better, but they didn't in this case. So that showed a systemic issue, which made me attack the mass airflow sensor, which he said he cleaned, or a fuel delivery issue, fuel pump, bad injector, something like that. Since he wasn't there, I didn't want to do the fuel system test because it's a Toyota. American cars tend to have the Schrader valve right here, so it makes it on the fuel rail, which makes it very easy and quick to test the fuel pressure. This Toyota didn't have that, so I couldn't do it, so I decided to check out the next simplest thing, which would be the mass airflow sensor. This particular sensor is actually two sensors in one housing. The one circled here is the IAT, intake air temperature sensor, and the actual air sensor are these two down in the tube. But if you look right here, there's one resistor and another resistor. When I took his off and looked at them, they were very dirty, but the IAT was very clean. So what that told me is he cleaned the IAT and not the mass air sensor. So I used mass airflow sensor cleaner with a Q-tip and very, very lightly cleaned these resistors. I mean light. And when I pulled the Q-tip out, the tip was very black. So these were very dirty. And then to dry it off, I used compressed air. Once I reinstalled it, I checked the long-term and short-term fuel trims running, and there was an immediate improvement. I then turned off the vehicle, hooked up my scope meter to the sensor signal wire, and it on a snap to wide open throttle, quick snap, it did reach 4 volt. So if you watch some of Scanner Danner's videos on how to test a mass airflow sensor, that's a good number, 4 volts. So I knew that was a fix. So at that time, the short-term fuel trim was at 13% and the long-term was at 14%, which was great. It was at 1%, right, when you combine them. So I considered it a fix. And so I went home, called him to make an appointment the next day to show him my results. When I arrived, he said they used the car the previous night, about 40 miles, and the check engine light turned off. So he was very happy. But I just wanted to verify the fix by doing a brief ride. And here's on my scan tool, a result of that. So if you notice here, though, for the most part, the long-term fuel trim is about 11, and the short-term is countering it and bringing it down. But for some reason, the long-term just wouldn't go down to single digits, which I really wanted it to. But yet many times the short-term was doing that. So I didn't feel great, but the car did function correctly. And then right here in the red circle, I did a wide open quick acceleration to wide open throttle and then dropped off to test the fuel delivery system. And this curve waveform is what it should look like. So it dips down, which means rich, and then when you let off the throttle, it immediately goes lean to counteract it and then settles in. So that's a very good waveform. I ignored the downstream O2 because the car didn't really warm up. I didn't drive it that much, so I ignored that. Probably shouldn't have, but we'll discuss that later. So what I did notice, though, is the car had an initial hesitation when you would accelerate it off idle. I demonstrated that to him, but he felt since the check engine light was off, no more tests were needed. He considered a fix, so I wrapped up the job, and I was happy. I helped him out. I spent around 15 minutes or so diagnosing and cleaning the mass airflow sensor, and then quickly testing the results. So that was, I felt good about it. It was quick. Real quick in the end. What went well? I didn't make any assumptions, even though he said he cleaned the mass airflow sensor. I checked it out, and in this case, he cleaned the IAT. I used the graphing scan tool, and it quickly allowed me to determine that it wasn't an intake manifold leak, and it allowed me to verify my fix. It was very easy to get to the mass airflow sensor and to clean it. Like I said, cleaning it quickly showed a difference in the behavior of the long-term and short-term fuel trim, and the P0171 code cleared on its own. I don't like to clear codes unless absolutely necessary. What could have gone better? I really should have captured before and after scan tool and scope meter readings for the mass airflow sensor before I cleaned it. That way I could have shown to him, just cleaning it, what it looks like. I should have downloaded maybe a 1 day or a month Mitchell manual for that car, so I could have seen maybe there was a quick way to perform a fuel pressure test and maybe even a fuel pump current test. But looking back, it might not have needed it, since the waveform up here looked real good. The air fuel sensor waveform looked real good. But the car still hesitated off idle, and it had a pending P0420 or catalyst efficiency below threshold in bank 1. Car only had 1 bank. I wish I could have debugged the hesitation off idle, but he didn't want to do that. Anyway, I hope the sharing of this case study shows some tricks that you could do, and it shows what maybe you can do better than me the next time you do a similar light test. Thank you for watching. I hope you found the information helpful.